It is House of Strauss. We are thrilled. One of our favorite returning guests, Colin Cowherd, media mogul. And that's going to be a bit of a topic on this show. We're going to get into it. I'm fascinated by this whole era of being the face and being behind the scenes in sports media. But first of all, the pleasantries. Colin, how you doing?
Ethan, I've told you this many times. I text you from time to time. I find you fascinating. I think one of the things I like, and this is a long hello about what you do, is you're an experimenter. You're willing. You got a little bit of a geologist DNA. You like to go searching for stuff, and not terribly concerned about being right all the time, although you usually are. But I really appreciate you're a very curious soul, and I love listening to. I think in a world where social media terrifies people of being wrong or off, you're willing to go searching and take swings, and I really appreciate it. I find it was. I listened to a couple of them when I was in Rhode Island walking on the beach, and it's just always a really interesting listen.
Oh, I very much appreciate that. There's a lot of mutual admiration here. And yeah, I wonder, is it that I'm unconcerned with social media? I think part of getting a bit older is understanding your limitations. I know I would be too concerned if I engaged. So I just try not to. I don't participate. I think that's a bit of, there's a downside to that, Colin, where I could probably be a better media brand. That sounds weird to say. If I was on Twitter throwing out all my opinions, but I also know that would just make me insane, and it would ultimately be a huge wrench in the gears of whatever it is I do. So in a weird way, it's not that I'm unconcerned with those conversations and the blowback. Like anybody, I hate getting criticized, but I know that about myself. And so you try to, take the proper actions around one's weaknesses.
Yeah, I tend to like Derek Thompson, Michael Lewis, Malcolm Gladwell. I think you fall into that category where you're an explorer, and I don't, there's places I get my news in the morning. I go to the New York Times or CNN, but I like the exploratory nature of podcasting, where you can just kind of go on a mission and go on a hunt, and I like that stuff because I've always had that's kind of been my belief on my business, is there has to be more than just playing it safe and reporting. And, sometimes it's like, folks, I'm going to take a big swing on this. I may be wrong, but this popped into my head. And I think the audience likes that. I like that. So I do a show that I would like, which is not necessarily always right, but I try to formulate interesting theories or kind of belief systems, and you don't have to take them. You don't have to consume them, but here it is. Make of it what you will.
Well, it might not always be right, but it's always engaged. And I noticed something you said on today's show that you did that cut against what I was hearing from other people. And to set it up, I will say this. I mean, my main philosophy with what I'm doing is that I need to be interested in it. Now, maybe whatever I'm interested in is not going to be what the listener is interested in. But if I'm not interested in it, I'm drawing dead at the poker table. I can't translate it. There's no heat there. There's no engagement. You said when you started your show today that, oh my God, we've got so much to talk about. I know it's July, but we've got great topics. And I love that because I've been hearing content from different broadcasters during this downtime in sports, as it were. And they admit that. They reveal that. And when they reveal that to me, that it's sort of a dead time, so we're talking about this or that topic, I don't really want to listen at that point. I need to feel like there's some curiosity, some engagement, some excitement. And I want that sort of vicarious spark right there. And for whatever reason, not everybody brings that. I think it might be rooted in insecurity in some people, where they're afraid that this isn't the time, the material, people are going to disengage. But what I appreciate is it's July, Colin is locked in, and we're talking sports, and I can turn here to be excited about something.
Yeah, we had a really good morning prep session, and we started at 6:12 and we finished at 7:40 something. And I turned around and we didn't pause. And I thought, God, this is a really good prep day. Like, we had a lot of things to talk about. It felt like a Tuesday in the NFL where I had two really good, strong things to say up front. I had a couple good guests in Adam Wainwright and Nick Wright. And I looked at the guys and I said, God, this is a good show. And when we were done, I walked out for lunch with one of my bosses and I said, we really had a good show today. We had like an October show. So credit to my staff. When I walk in every morning, there's 8-9 people, and today was just a spitball idea, and people had a lot of strong feelings on stuff. And I remember talking to Phillip Rivers once, and he said he liked the process of kind of deconstructing a defense and building a game plan more than the game. And I don't know if I like that more than my show, but on the very best days of work, creating the show is at least as much fun as the show. And today was one of those days. I thought the staff did a really good job. We threw stuff out to each other, and it was just reciprocating back and forth. I threw out an idea, they threw it back. And I think it's really fun. I've never, when I listen to sports talk radio, there's a lot of talented people out there, but I do hear a lot of ad-libbing. And I think to myself, God, if you would have sat down and for 15, 20 minutes with your producer and really thought this puppy out and wrote that, you could have taken that and made it into something greater. And I think when I watch certain shows like PTI, I think does a good job of making me think. I can tell they put in the time and the thought exercise to take 90 seconds, make it 3 minutes, and it's really thoughtful. And they only have 22, 23 minutes of airtime. I always appreciate that. So I just thank you for that. And I thought the staff had a really good day today.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about the process, because Jon Stewart was on Matt Bellamy's podcast and he was talking about how they put that show together, The Daily Show, and how he was saying, I'm a process nerd. And these things that you find funny as the audience are engaging, it almost seems, because it's presented as though Jon Stewart is up there and he's just riffing, but it comes out of this boring, maybe not boring, but it comes out of this process. And there is this grind that then produces something funny or inspirational. I know you were just talking there's a podcast you're talking to Edelman about how they would just practice something drearily over and over and over again, thinking it would never becomes something, and then boom, week 16 it decides the game. And so I think there's a lesson about life in that there is a process, and it is easy to see what is presented to you, especially in a TV show, which is what sports is, by the way. We can find a little bit of a parallel there. But behind the very inspiring, the improvised, there's all sorts of work that goes into it. Not only is there work, but there's this process, this skeleton, this rhythm that people are organized by that produces the product.
Yeah, I just was on the phone today, a Zoom call with Doug Myro, who was a writer for Narcos and Narcos Mexico. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy, also a big NFL fan. And I pitched the show with my friend Eric Tannenbaum to AMC, and they were really interested in it. So we interviewed a bunch of writers, and Doug Myro is from Birmingham, Michigan, happens to be a huge NFL fan. And so I pitched him an idea I had for a show and gave him 3 or 4 weeks to kind of chop it up and work on it. And he pitched it back to us today. He's so brilliant. He's such a brilliant guy and so funny and thoughtful. And I wrote all these notes for about the 45-minute meeting of him pitching back the idea for the show. And that, to me, that pitch back and forth is my favorite part of the business. There is something, I like how Jon Stewart says he's a process nerd. My wife, interestingly, is a project person, loves a big project that takes 4 months. I like daily process. And so, it's the kind of a seesaw. I'm always trying to create these projects for her, or she creates them. And she knows how much I like process. I need something every day. I need to go on a walk, listen to a podcast, come up with a thought, write it down. And so I had one of those experiences today, and it's just, I'm like, oh my God, I hope this partnership works, because he is so good he's a combination of process and project. I mean, if you create Narcos, he was one of the writers on that, which is my favorite show. That's my Sopranos. Narcos is my favorite show ever. That and Mindhunter. So it's just like, I think I was, if I wouldn't have done this, maybe I'd been an accountant or something. I like the idea of architecture and building things.
I mean, it's a good thing to build things. It will definitely keep you sane. What I'm wondering, I've got 2 questions. You can maybe address both, or maybe take either one. I'm curious about this era of the in sports media, the Jay-Z not being a businessman, but being a business comma man, and how there are all these people, we call them moguls, where they're not only the CEO of their company, but they're the face. That's you with the volume. You see it with Bill Simmons, where he's the face of his company. He's a performer and a CEO. Pat McAfee is another example. Dan Le Batard is another example. I might even be leaving out a few of them. I want to know how difficult that is, number one. And I also want to know, why do you think it's happening? And I don't remember, it's just sort of taken for granted now that there are so many people who are the face and the performer of the thing they're running while they have employees under them.
Well, there's so many platforms now and so many places for on-air or performers or entertainers to go. And so it used to be like an ESPN had all the leverage, but they don't anymore. And so on-air people have equal leverage. In my case, I don't think you ever want to abuse that, but I've got a radio contract. I'm getting my XM Sirius rights here pretty soon. I have a Fox deal. I have the volume. I have a deal with DraftKings. These didn't exist, all these avenues. And YouTube. And so there's multiple places that a Simmons, a McAfee, whoever can go. And that gives them leverage. And I think it also gives you freedom. I've always had really good corporate relationships. But I've been lucky. My corporate partners understand the game. I'm 60 now. There are certain things I won't do. There are certain things I want to do. And I just think it's, on-air people have more options. It's almost like what happened with the shoe business for NBA players. You used to be an NBA player. And then all of a sudden there were more teams. So there's more opportunities. And then Converse and Nike and Adidas. And now there's secondary revenue streams. And now there's social media. And a basketball player can make 7 figures on Instagram, Nike, his basketball team. He creates a production company or a podcast. And so players now have more leverage. I mean, LeBron James got total leverage over the Lakers, complete, utter, and that's the number one brand in the league. So I think it's a combination of certain people grow a big enough brand that they have more options and more companies coming after them. And I think the way to attain the best people is to allow them some freedom. And I am allowed that at my companies. iHeart, Fox Sports. I have very give and take relationships.
Yeah, it just seems difficult because there's just got to be a lot of emotion and focus put into how am I doing as I perform my show and how is my company doing under me. I mean, is that something that you reflect on? Do you often feel like one is going one way, but the other has other things to attend to, or is it all just second nature at this point?
Well, I gave it a lot of thought, and I looked at, Barstool and Ringer. I looked at a lot of different companies doing this, sports and non-sports. And my takeaway was, because I do a 3-hour show a day and it's pretty exhausting. I don't have a panel. I don't talk to my producers on the air. I don't take calls. I don't have 5 or 6 guests. It's a lot of me, and it works. We have a fast pace. J-Mac is great. My staff's amazing. Good production, excellent support. So it works, but it's pretty exhausting. And so when I built the volume, my takeaway was I didn't want to take a salary. We created very quickly multiple revenue streams, and I wanted to build a really, really good management support staff. So it's very easy lifting for me. I have 3 or 4 during the football season. I'll do an hour on Sunday. I'll do Monday Night Football. I'll do an interview on Thursday. I'll do during the season several Saturday hits, 15, 20-minute YouTube hits on the volume. But I set it up so it's a light lift. And I put my money in the first 3 years of the company into management. And it's been very fruitful. Logan Swaim is my CEO. He's remarkable. We just have a really good group all over the country. And it's allowed us to grow very quickly. And it's allowed us, this management team allows us to pursue and land a Shannon Sharp, And he's going to need multiple producers and a big support system. And, if I was gobbling up all the salary, we wouldn't be able to do that. So I think I was in a pretty unique position that I could build a company while having two corporate entities paying me. So I can't speak for how everybody else did it. Portnoy was a long road. Dave's, I have a lot of respect for his mission and his performance off air. He really was a grinder for over a decade. Bill Simmons, he's been grinding for years. Grantland, that was a lot of work. So this stuff doesn't come easy. It's really hard. And my theory was build a really strong management team. And I also got very lucky because of COVID. A lot of really talented people were on the beach that companies cut back, and it gave me an opportunity to hire people that would have never been available without a pandemic. But companies cut back, and I'm sitting there thinking, that person's available? I grabbed 8 to 10 people I thought I would have never been able to land. But they were, companies made moves, and people also in the pandemic found out they liked working from home. And that's one of the things I offered. I said, listen, this company and this company won't let you do it. Live in New Hampshire. Do it from home. Work 4 days a week. And that, the pandemic in a strange way was the birth of our company. And we were very fortunate that it allowed us to compete for some people we otherwise could not have.
I probably should have mentioned Portnoy and Barstool because that is this gate crashing example of the mogul and the company. Yeah. What did you think looking back on it? This is a random digression I didn't anticipate asking you about Barstool nearly years ago forming a merger with ESPN. I view that as this turning point in sports media where maybe things could have been way different, but ESPN had issues with things Portnoy had said in the past, and it all fell apart right there, and they went their separate ways. What did you think about that?
Well, it's funny. I say this as a compliment. Dana White runs the UFC, but I don't view him as a commissioner. I view him as an entrepreneur. I don't view Dave Portnoy as a broadcaster. I view him as a personality, and I never thought it was a great fit at ESPN. He's most famous for the pizza stuff, which is a great idea. But ESPN's it's a broadcasting company, and so a lot of the top podcasters aren't great broadcasters. What they are is they're good interviewers, excellent performers, attention drawers. They do a really good job of that. Podcasting, it's the wild, wild west. And Joe Rogan had a nice stand-up career, Fear Factor, but he's perfect because he's a bit conspiratorial. He's very, very curious. He's got a great sense of humor. He can talk on multiple subjects, but is there a broadcasting company per se that you'd put him on and it would be as relevant or as effective? He's perfect for the platform. There's people on TikTok in 90 seconds that are remarkable. I wouldn't be interested in any other platform, but they can perform in 90 seconds. Instagram, all these platforms, everything's different. Twitter is about clever, books are about smart, TV's about a dynamic appearance. Appearance can matter, energy matters on TV, radio's about storytelling. They're all different. Bill Simmons, a brilliant writer, very strong podcaster. I think he'd be the first to admit, television, he was okay, but it probably wasn't ideal for him. Vin Scully better on radio, everybody's got a strength. And I think, I digress, but I think going back to Dave, I think Barstool has been built perfectly around what he does best, which is draw attention, be funny, outspoken. And I always thought kind of the broadcasting company, legacy broadcasting, and Dave was going to be an odd fit. I didn't think it would end the way it ended, but there are certain protocols and standards and restrictions and borders on broadcasting companies that Dave's not going to play by.
I'm fascinated by that condition of the medium specificity, because we've seen this before where people are a huge hit as a YouTuber And I think they gave Lily Singh a talk show because she was great on YouTube, and it was just this massive disaster. It did not work.
Yeah.
You're very much fit to the medium. I'm wondering what you're looking for when you're scouting nowadays. I met Jason Timpf out there in Las Vegas. He's great on YouTube working for you guys on the NBA. And I read an article about how you saw this clip of him and then instantly knew. Do you know what you're looking for? Or is it one of these, as said by famously the Supreme Court, you know it when you see it kind of deals?
It's different. I mean, I was always a huge Shannon Sharpe fan. I remember he came on my show when I first started on FS1, and he came on for about 15 minutes. And I literally, when he left, I went upstairs and told the bosses, do not let him leave the building. Hire him now. He's theatrical. He's funny. He's, got some intellectual and humor bandwidth. He can talk about a lot of stuff. And then Draymond Green worked with LeBron, and I listened to him, and I thought, they just don't quite know in LeBron's camp what to do with him. I'm like, this guy just needs a little coaching and a little guidance, but there's something really there. It was almost like he was a quarterback who had a defensive coach and needed an off. It was almost like Jared Goff with Jeff Fisher. He just needed the right coach and the right feel. He got McVay, and he's in Super Bowls. I felt like Draymond, the talent was there. He just needed a little refinement and a little guidance, and he immediately became a star. So it's a lot of different things. Some people, John Middlecoff was in the Bay Area, and a buddy called me and said, I think he's really good. Radio doesn't know what to do with him. And then I listened to him, and I just thought he was way too good to be on the beach. And then I liked that he was an NFL scout. He was very connected and a hustler, and we developed a friendship. And it's a lot of different things. Again, I'm not afraid to miss. I've taken swings on people, and sometimes my intuition's poor. So, we're not, I think I texted Peter Chernin and Mark Cuban when I started the whole thing, and I just asked him, give me a piece of advice. And, some of the advice was very, it was very similar, which is don't fall in love with your idea. Have a vision for the company, but when it comes to the day-to-day details, be nimble. Things are going to change rapidly. And I've tried to always remember that. It's not about being right. Guys tend to get paralyzed by being right. It's about getting it right. So I call Logan Swain all the time, and I'm like, I've got an idea. He shoots down 6 of 7. And that's okay. I'll say, what do you think about this person? Blah, blah, blah. We'll go look at the feed, and it just doesn't work. So I'm often wrong, but it's okay. I'll go back to the beginning. I like the journey. I don't care if it's always right. I'm just looking for different people and different avenues of entertainment. And sometimes you see it instantly, and then sometimes it's a process, and you do homework, and it's just, the whole thing is fun to me.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by what works, and it's still ineffable to me. I don't completely know why it works, right? I have a general sense of why Shannon Sharpe connects and why that podcast of his is this huge hit, but I couldn't explain it on a granular level. Just like I might not be able to explain why something doesn't work. I just know that energy, commitment, working hard gives you a shot at it. But
he works really hard. He is really committed. Yeah, really committed. He and Draymond Green. Shannon's the hardest worker I've ever met in sports. I mean, he is. I mean, we've literally said, hey, you could take a day off. Like, he is just really wants to entertain the audience. He's an incredibly hard worker.
So how does that manifest itself? Is this another one of these things like the Daily Show and Jon Stewart, where people just see the product and they don't think much about what goes into it? I think a lot of people might watch Shannon Sharpe and go, this guy's just naturally charismatic, and that's why this thing works. So what does that look like? What does Shannon working hard look like?
Well, when he came over, our first takeaway is, okay, you got Club Shay Shay, but we think that you would be great doing a few nights a week, a night show. And we felt at the Volume, there was an opening at night. And this is something I pitched to ESPN years ago. I'm like, all these daytime opinion shows, there's a lot of nights in sports that are slow, especially out of football. And Shannon had a relationship with Ocho Cinco, and those two just are funny together. They brought in Gilbert Arenas for basketball. I think he does an excellent job. I would have, didn't know he was interested in that. And so, he worked very hard. We created a show called Nightcap, and it was popular. And again, Shannon puts in the time. There were nights that weren't scheduled. He wanted to go on and talk about stuff. And there's no substitute for effort. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you go look at, Brady's career or Derek Jeter's career, they grind their ass off. That's it. And they're usually really disciplined and really focused. And that's what Shannon is as a performer. And so is Jason Timpf and Middlecoff. I mean, Middlecoff, you can't keep him off the podcast during the football season. He's got something to, I want my guys to have, a Tuesday or a Wednesday off. Go hang out with your wife or girlfriend or kids. I don't want to work anybody to death, but I just think, our team is mostly people who have been overlooked. Draymond Green's second round, people who have been let go somewhere. We've got a real work ethos, and I'm really proud of our team. I really am. I just think Shannon is throwing ideas at us monthly, and I just feel very fortunate.
It's funny what you're talking about. It's so true. Hard work actually works. It actually does. For whatever reason, we've gotten out of the gospel of that. They used to have the Horatio Alger tales about how hard work would pay off. And I know there's this consideration that it won't accomplish everything for somebody and misfortune befalls people and it's not their fault. But it's definitely something I'm trying to instill in my sons because it works. And when you mentioned Brady, I think Brady is going to be successful as a broadcaster for your company. Yeah. And you can say it's Pollyanna-ish or whatever, but I know he works hard. People are saying he works hard. Therefore, I expect that to work. It's not crazy, but you don't hear people talk about that too much for whatever reason.
Well, I mean, it's not glamorous. I mean, that's why I think Twitter has so many bad actors. Twitter is easy. Writing books, go ask Bill Simmons, the basketball book, the book of basketball. Bill's a very, very fluid, gifted writer. I asked him, "What, you gonna write another book?" He's like, "Never." It was so hard.
Oh yeah.
This stuff Twitter's easy. TikTok, to be great at anything is hard, but that's why I don't spend too much time consuming too much of it. Any amateur can go on and have, get clicks and say silly stuff. God, how many conspiracy theories on Trump now? I said this today on the air. Don't confuse inefficiency or marginal talent by a Secret Service agent for a conspiracy theory. There's very few people who are great at anything. Not every pilot or doctor is an A. There's a lot of C graduates. And, obviously Biden's got the best Secret Service team, right? The sitting president does. Yeah. And there were mistakes made. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory. Average people, new people on a fresh assignment that haven't been there before make a lot of mistakes. And so, that's why I'm always very wary of what I just try to dial back my consumption of certain things. I like things that are hard. I like to read. I like a Netflix, a documentary. They're hard. People have put time in them. And that's the stuff I trust, not just some random, somebody that can spend 4 minutes, filtering a tape or an image and get clicks. There's not a lot of win for me, the consumer. I think a lot of it, you get fooled. Yeah. You go down rabbit holes and you're like, what am I doing with my life?
That's a good insight, that Twitter is the odd thing, or X or whatever we're calling it now, that somebody can do well without being a hard worker, and that might skew the conversation. I like that theory. The politics thing is an interesting one. I'm curious about this. You don't do a lot of politics, but if it's a big enough story, it's something that will be mentioned. Obviously, you just referenced that there was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump over the weekend. And Do you have any rules for when to bring that in, when to discuss it? I know that when you talk with Nick Wright, that seems like a compartmentalized space where you guys can talk about that kind of thing, but it wouldn't necessarily be part of your Fox show, for instance. What are your thoughts on talking politics?
Well, I think my Fox audience expects football. And I think my radio audience, I've said this before, Ethan, if my show was just radio or just Sirius XM, it would be more wide ranging. You can't really monitor minute to minute ratings in those industries. It allows me more freedom. Television, I get minute to minute cable television ratings on my TV show, and those are monitored by management, me, my staff. So I'm much less willing to just veer and take the exit on the interstate. Like I stay on the interstate. I have to shorten my stories, which I could tell a 7 or 8 minute story on radio that would be a really fun radio story. That's going to be 90 seconds on television. People have a remote. That audience will jettison any conversation. The minute it's boring, images attract people. They'll click immediately. They'll see a beautiful woman. They'll see a sport. They'll see a game, an interesting commercial, and they're gone into the ether. They've moved to a different channel. Radio audiences or audio audiences in general are more loyal. If I have a podcast audience, they searched me out on demand. They're there for the 45 minutes. People who have clicked this on, they're here for mostly the entirety of the podcast or close to it. So in television, I'm not going to misuse my position. I just think it's bad. Nobody turns to Sean Hannity for football picks. So, but if he had a podcast and he wanted to talk football and an experience, he's with his son, I'd probably stick around and listen because I searched out his podcast. So I think every platform has a different consumer, and that consumer has a different patience level or temperament on that platform. I mean, when I go to listen to podcasts, I'm doing an hour 20 walk in Rhode Island on a beach. You don't have to be brilliant the entire time. I'm there. You know, I put it in my ear, I plug it in, I'm there for an hour 20. When I'm in front of my TV, the minute somebody's boring, I go to the kitchen. You know, I go grab a beer. I do something else.
Yeah. I mean, people just have different tolerance too for hearing something they disagree with politics versus sports. For whatever reason, I might disagree with you and with Nick on Brock Purdy, but I can hear it out and I can listen to it perhaps more easily than I guess some people could if they politically disagreed. For whatever reason, when you and Nick talk politics, I'll often find myself maybe disagreeing with something or thinking, oh, I agree with this, but there should be balance with this. But I don't go away. For whatever reason, it's done in a way where it's interesting. It's interesting to get a little behind the scenes of what the sports broadcasters think about this other aspect of American life. And it's the right medium for it. Whereas I don't think it would necessarily be that if on the Fox show you guys were riffing about Trump and riffing about the election.
Yeah, I thought there was a time at ESPN when John Skipper ran it where I thought a lot of young broadcasters made the mistake at ESPN of instead of going to their personal platforms to discuss politics, they did it on the air. And I thought, I wasn't going to do that. I mean, and I was watching the numbers, regress. And my takeaway was they just don't know what they don't know is that, in research, eventually when George Bodenheimer stepped in for a brief time indicated, he got the train back on the tracks and said, guys, that's not what you're here for. So I think, somebody like a Dan Patrick or an older broadcaster, Stephen A. Smith, has built in so much credibility with the audience. They can go different places for longer periods. But I think generally, if you turn to a sports network, you want sports.
Yeah, I think that is generally the case. I always make the analogy of somebody goes to a vending machine. They push the button E3 for a Reese's peanut butter cup and a sardine pops out. They might be into sardines. Very popular sardines are in the Iberian area. People like sardines and a lot of things. But I wanted candy. That's what I pressed the button for. And there was this time where you would try to explain that, or customers would explain that, and especially at ESPN, people get on their high horse and they'd start lecturing the customer about, well, you can't tell me to stick to sports. How dare you? And it's, hey, look, what can I tell you? Maybe this is the risk you want to take. Maybe this is what you want to do. You feel like what you've got to say about the world is so important that you will sacrifice audience, but don't deny that you're taking that risk. You can't have it both ways, but they want to have it both ways so often.
Yeah, I think it's gotten, I think people have come back. I mean, everything to some degree is a learning experience. And so, I mean, God, Joy Taylor and I during the pandemic had no games. For like 5 months, we had no games. And Joy and I would just look at each other and we're like, thank God for the MJ documentary. And we riffed on it. We had these longer conversations, and you just kind of, you live and learn, and you have different obstacles and hurdles. And, and I think people, I've young people make mistakes. I made mistakes. I still do. It's just a process. We're all, it's anytime you do this long form stuff, you do sports centers and you do debate shows, and they're 2 and 3 hours. I mean, local radio, you'll have 4 and 5 hour shows. You're not getting gems. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have wild lapses. You just hope you're interesting. But I think everything's a learning experience. And I think there was a time when politics was talked about too much by sports people. And I think the ship has been righted.
I think so. I think it's a good amount. I think there are people on the conservative side who definitely had a point that it was too much and it was sanctimonious and self-righteous. But then I'm a big believer in taking yes for an answer. People don't want to take yes for an answer. I feel like that side, in a way, should go, yes, and it has been leavened. It has been corrected to a degree. But you see this, and you see this on all sides. People like to be angry. They like to be engaged in that way. And some people, when the very thing they wanted reformed gets reformed, they don't want to acknowledge it. They lose a little something. But I might be getting digressive and talking about all that. I do want to talk about not just the political risks. I find it interesting. Your show, you sometimes on the TV I thought today, the show you did today, felt a little bit risky to me, a little bit risque, where you were talking about how you think Nike might have had something to do with Jaylen Brown not getting on Team USA. I was fascinated hearing that take, Colin, and I was wondering, is that something at all where you have to go, wait, who are our sponsors? Is this going to result in any blowback? Do you have to almost just explore the potential ramifications of a take like that?
No, because I think I wasn't name calling. I wasn't unfair. Their stock is down 33% in 6 months. The Major League Baseball jersey fiasco is just a mess by a usually spot on company. I think the Olympic stuff is another mess. Phil Knight's 86 and has acknowledged that Oregon football is a primary focus, winning a natty, before time elapses for Phil, a visionary and a brilliant man who I really admire and like. I loved his memoir, by the way. And so I thought it was fair and reasonable. And my theme at the top of today's show, and Rich Paul and LeBron similarly, men love power. Power corrupts. And I thought in both Nike's case with Jaylen Brown and Kyrie Irving, and LeBron and Klutch's case with Bronny being drafted, they got in the way of the natural flow of business. They could, and they had the leverage to, but it's always a dance. And both used the sledgehammer more than a softer touch. And they sort of engineered a different outcome. Bronny probably doesn't get drafted. Jaylen Brown should make the Olympic team. And that's the cautionary tale of power, is that men usually use it. I remember the late, great Jackie Gleason, and I've used this a lot of times. I think about it often. Jackie Gleason said, if you really have power, you'll never have to use it. John Gotti at his height. Everybody knew when John walked into the Ravenite Club whose club it was. Like, Jackie Gleason had more power than any comedian on TV in American history. He didn't have to use it. It was understood. And so I think it's very difficult that when you have power and leverage, not to use it. And I think Nike and Klutch and LeBron took a swing. I'll defend both. I lived in Oregon. Nike was an incredible and still remains a incredibly dynamic part of Oregon's history. And I think LeBron and Klutch have been overwhelmingly good for the NBA. But these were engineered away from the natural flow of business. And you see Bronny has been borderline, well, not even borderline. He's been awful offensively. And Nike's embroiled in a bit of a mess.
Yeah, and it's tricky sometimes too, because another quote about power that I like, it's the Charlie Munger, show me the incentive and I'll show you the result, where I'm not sure if LeBron is saying with specificity, Lakers, you have to do this. I'm not sure. I get people giving me pushback when I've written about some of what's gone on with Dan Hurley and JJ Redick and everything else, that LeBron isn't pounding the table. But sometimes when somebody's very powerful, you can have what I call a catbird problem. Now, what I mean by that is this. Some of you who have had cats might have had this happen where your cat kills a bird and just gives you the bird and goes, here you go right here. This is what you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that you asked for it, but the cat is delivering it to you because the cat thinks you want that. Now, if I had to guess, I would guess that LeBron would make it known to the Lakers that he would want JJ Redick hired as the coach, or that Bronny should be on the team, or I'm leaving. But I don't know, because Rob Pelinka is an agent, and agents are people pleasers. So for all I know, some of what's happening and what you've characterized as not an abuse of power, but a misuse of power, it might just be Rob Pelinka trying to please. Here's the bird, and LeBron going, okay, I don't hate that. I'm into that. It could be that for all I know.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess LeBron and Rob had talked about JJ Redick and Klutch Sports, if not LeBron, Klutch Sports. Rich Paul is working the phones all day. So is Pelinka as a former agent. I'm sure there were discussions about it. Yeah. I don't think Rich Paul said, absolutely get him, but I think everybody kind of knew in the room that LeBron had great respect for JJ Redick. I mean, the people that I do podcasts with and the people that I have hired at my company, I obviously have great admiration or respect for them. So some things are unsaid. And I still think JJ Redick could work. I don't know if he will, but I think he could. So it's one of those things. I think, when I was younger, I think power, you really want to show off when you're young. I always say basketball players have three stages, the great ones. The show off stage, LeBron chasing people down and blocking their shot from behind. The championship stage, okay, I'm tired of showing off, I want a trophy. And then the mogul stage, which is basketball's important, but my net worth now is a big deal. I want to do a production company. And I think, similarly in our space, when you're young and a broadcaster, you really want to show your talent. I think as you age as a broadcaster, it's not about the power in that. I think it's about kind of the lubrication of business, watching others, picking your spots. And I think LeBron does that. I think LeBron picks his spots. He's very calculated. He doesn't use a sledgehammer necessarily, but he's got so many things. I mean, Maverick Carter could get in somebody's ear. Rich Paul, LeBron's friends. I mean, I just think LeBron has a way of getting a message out without talking. And I think at 23, LeBron would have gotten the message out directly. And I think he does it differently now. And that's almost an art form for somebody, whether it's a politician or an entertainer. There's an art to it as you grow, and there's almost a sex appeal as you age, delivering the message softly and convincing people to do things without using a hammer. Whereas you feel it's such a red meat tribal thing when you're young to use the hammer if you have any power. So.
Yeah. And I think what young players, to what you're saying, don't understand sometimes is that comes with a cost. The flexing of power can come with a cost.
Oh, yeah.
LeBron, I think, is unusual in that it's mostly worked out, that he's assumed so much power in these situations.
Yeah.
But I don't think Steph Curry could ever have been Steph Curry if he was of that mindset, because there is a value to compartmentalization, because you only do have so much bandwidth. So what does Steph do? Steph goes, Steve Kerr is the coach. and I'm letting Steve Kerr do what he does. The Warriors just lost Klay Thompson to free agency. There was this big discussion reporting about how Klay didn't want Steph to recruit him and bang the table to retain Klay. I've got my own thoughts on that, but the point is it's a conversation that you would have to ask Steph to do it, that you would not necessarily just assume that Steph is trying to run the Warriors, which he could have been running the Warriors. I think that has been a choice that he has made consistently, that I do basketball, you guys, you do everything else, and because I am putting all of my life force nearly into the basketball, I'm going to be a great basketball player. I think some of these guys, they try to be LeBron. They're not LeBron, and they screw up their situations, and they even undermine the very thing that got them the power.
You know, it's very interesting because you would say LeBron and Steph have done it the opposite way. But I think the reason LeBron and Steph have so much admiration for each other, I think they're two of the smartest basketball players in the last 20 years in the world. So Steph Curry was smart enough to realize very early, Steve Kerr, Joe Lacob, Silicon Valley, Klay Thompson, he didn't have to move. Jerry West comes aboard, like Bob Myers. So Steph, who wasn't the chosen one, who went to Davidson, who was a smaller athlete, had some injuries early, he recognized early, hey, I don't have to engineer anything. I have hit. This is Mahomes with Andy Reid, Brett Veach, and Travis Kelce. I don't have to engineer it. I just need to listen. LeBron realized very early, I'm in Cleveland. We can't tie our shoes and chew gum at the same time. He had to engineer a move to Miami. Then he felt bad. He comes back, and then he starts engineering. I don't want Wiggins. I want Kyrie and Kevin Love. So LeBron, equally smart, LeBron had to take a different path to win. LeBron didn't want to leave Cleveland. It could have been his Golden State, but he didn't have that owner. He didn't have that coach. He didn't have Klay Thompson, Jerry West in the building. So when people criticize LeBron for, some turbulence in his career and the mobility, he didn't have a choice. Mahomes, literally, here's the keys to a Mercedes. Josh Allen's almost equally as gifted or more, but he's never had an offensive coach. The offensive line hasn't been as good. They haven't had a consistent run game. He never had a Tyreek Hill. It's been different. So I think one of the things I've had really, really overwhelmingly good bosses and good management. I've known people that are really talented in this business that didn't and got screwed by people. And so I look at LeBron and Steph is what's fascinating. They took completely different routes, but both were smart enough to recognize very early to generate the most championships in production. One had to leave and one should never leave. And so that's what's fascinating about those two players.
And that's what's fascinating about NBA players in general is that they are just the hub of a multi-billion-dollar business in a way that we just don't see in these other sports. And their personalities inform what these massive franchises do in a way that outside of quarterback in the NFL, and even not even then, because there's not that much mobility in free agency with the NFL. And just the way their personalities are. I mean, you draw the distinction between Steph and LeBron. I'm now thinking about the distinction between Steph and KD, where both players great. And I think, and perhaps this is an oversimplification, you could make the argument that for Steph, his superpower was security. He's very secure. It's part of what makes him able to take a 35-foot shot and just act like it's normal. Whatever happens, happens. It's part of what allows him to cede power to other people, to delegate because he's secure. I think part of what made Kevin Durant great beyond his talent and his love of basketball, let's face it, I think it was insecurity. He wouldn't want me to say it. He might have an issue with me saying it, but he's not exactly known to be the most secure guy. And that can be a fire. It can fuel you that I'm going to show everybody. I'm going to show everybody how great I am. I'm going to work hard. Insecurity can be a powerful motivator, but it has its limitations, obviously. And in a situation like the Warriors had, where You're on a great team. You're in a great situation, as you're talking about, the analog to the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're not getting the credit or enough of it, that seemed like that was okay with Steph. For Kevin Durant, a bit of a problem, and thus it all breaks apart, not for basketball reasons necessarily, but because of these personality dynamics that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think Kevin Durant's a little bit of a tweener between Steph and LeBron. I think his initial landing spot, remember, Kevin Durant starts in Seattle. We're told the new owners of the Sonics will keep it, and then they bail. So he doesn't necessarily trust ownership in the NBA. And then he goes to Oklahoma City, and though they win games, Westbrook is a bit problematic because he's so ball-centric, and Kevin's sitting there at the end of the shot clock getting the ball late. So it works, but it's not an ideal situation. Then he makes a brilliant pivot and a courageous one to the Warriors. So like LeBron, they had to make a move. Where Kevin made a mistake, and I don't think LeBron would have made that, because LeBron even bailed on his friend D. Wade. Kevin's like, I just want a ball. I'm going to go with Kyrie. That's a bad business decision. I've likened that to Mahomes saying, I got a friend who's a receiver. I'm going to go play for the Jets. We tend to be a little more protective of our NBA stars for whatever reasons. We would bash an NFL guy for doing that, or a quarterback. But, it was like, well, Kevin, he's a wanderer. He just wants to play ball. And everybody's like, yeah, I remember saying this is an absolutely dreadful professional decision. And it set him back. But I'm not too punitive. I tend to think that whereas Steph is about family, LeBron is an ascendant athlete about, I don't know if it's selfish or not, but he is about LeBron, family similarly, but he's had a different route. Kevin is, he's very Aaron Rodgers. He's a very unique personality. I don't have any similarities with his personality. I could see things with Steph and say, oh, I feel that. Or LeBron, the way he compartmentalizes things. I find Kevin, for me, to be a hard read. We just don't see the world the same. I could not imagine going to a company when I was at a great company, leaving and going to a company with a bad history because a friend went. I don't even know. That wouldn't even enter. I'd be like, hey, good luck. So I think Kevin, for me, will always be a bit of an enigma, is that I think he's one of the great individual talents of my lifetime. I've argued if there was a one-on-one basketball tournament, take out centers, Durant would win. He'd beat MJ, couldn't stop him, and either could LeBron, and he's long enough to get enough stops that he would beat both in one-on-one. But he is a little bit of Aaron Rodgers. I can't imagine taking ayahuasca or going to a darkness retreat or missing camp for a trip to Egypt. So I just chalk it up to we're just different people.
Yeah, there is that similarity. I do like that comparison because both KD and Aaron Rodgers have that thing in them of, well, I should be able to do what I want. I should be able to say what I want. I shouldn't be constrained. Look how great I am. I'm going to do what I want. And hey, there's no law against it. Sometimes it's very interesting. Unlike a lot of people in media, I actually don't hate either of those guys. I just see them as prickly and a bit consumed with self. I don't see them as bad guys. I don't see them. I don't have the idea with Rodgers. I don't have the ideological baggage some in the media have with him, but I just see them as a little bit them focused with this additional aspect of defiance of, well, I shouldn't have to modulate. I shouldn't have to.
Well, and also both never married. They're like, the wealthier and older you get without a partner, like somebody to call you on your shit. Bill Simmons has talked about this. Like Aaron's gotten into a stage where never married, no kids, may not have a pet. He's going to do what he wants to do. And that becomes, that's counter to most top employees in professional sports. LeBron's all about family. Steph's about family. Aaron's about Aaron. I'm not blaming him for it, but I do think I've seen it in the media where, Bill Maher's legendary, never married, no kids. Bill's going to just blaze his own trail. He's going to take big swings. He's very fearless because he's not protecting anybody. He doesn't care how it, I mean, I've thought before certain times, I got kids. I don't want to go here. Like, I don't want this to be part of my legacy. Maybe I shouldn't think about that. Maybe I should be more of a trailblazer. But I got a lot of people I've got in my family, my circle, and I do think about stuff like that.
Yeah, and Bill is going to be the face. He's going to be another one of these media moguls, and it can kind of work that way without the kids and the wife. I'm not saying everybody should get married and have kids, but you're identifying a real thing. I think with Klay Thompson, he's been very grumpy the last 2 years, and it's a bit of an open secret how grumpy he's been. And you can fault Warriors management for this or that, but it does feel like the grumpiness is maybe out of alignment with the situation and what it's been like. And you got to wonder if that also might be another instance of, well, if you're not married, no kids, there might be a void there. It might be.
What do you go home to after a bad night or a disagreement? Yeah. What do you go home to? How do you downshift? If I have a lousy day at work, I almost always have a great day at home. I chalk it up to, honey, let's go out. I'll call my daughter. Let's go to dinner. Like, this is real stuff. Like, this is, I mean, there's a reason that, they want pilots only flying so many days and they want them to be rested. And there's all sorts of jobs like this. You have to be certain ages to be a president. Like, there are these borders on certain jobs. And, I think we forget sometimes because they're celebrities and they're rich, bad. Lou Holtz always talks about this in college football. You get a different team every week. I mean, a kid flunks the class. He's got girlfriend breaks up with him. College football, like Nick Saban made it a factory. Like, you felt like you got the same team every week. But I've watched Urban Meyer teams at Ohio State go to Purdue and get blown out. Like, how? Purdue doesn't have four guys who would start for them. You're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids.
Yeah, and when you don't have the wife or a kid and you're a very famous athlete, what you often have is the yes man is what you got around you. My wife doesn't tell me everything I'm doing at work. Like, yes, you're right. Yes, they're being unfair to you. Sometimes she's going to go, well, are you sure about that? Or have you thought about this? That isn't going to be the case when you are a famous NBA player. You're going to have your entourage. You are the focus of their lives. And so you're just going to get, in this classic way, the validation of whatever your grievances are. They're going to nurse that. And they're going to nurse that in part because they need to prove to you that they're the ones who have your back and they're the ones who are necessary as a way of glomming on against this thing. So it's easier to get unhappy. I do want to, maybe as we're hitting the home stretch, talk about this. I thought you had a great take. It was sort of a double take. It was sort of a 1-2 take on the politics thing, but it was more of a general thing. It was, Biden has really fallen apart, to be honest, and it was revealed to people in the debate. And you were talking about, and I'm going to butcher the actual take, people. Like, Colin did a better job. I'm recapitulating here, so I apologize. But you were talking about how there had been this reluctance to admit it because in politics, people have a reluctance to criticize when performance isn't up to snuff. And there's this tribalism. But in sports, we still have that to a degree. And we still have, hey, you made the playoffs, but you never come through in the playoffs. And that's an issue. Let's talk about it. And your take was this 1-2 of identifying the chasm between politics and sports in this way, but also a bit of a warning of, let's not make the sports like the politics. I'm a little bit concerned about how this is creeping into it, where some of you just don't want to admit some of the warts on your favorite thing or whatever you're rooting for. I thought that was a great take, man. I don't have a good question for you to expound upon it. I just want to throw that out there because I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, sports has standings. And so you don't really get into a lot of echo chambers in a locker room. You lose, heads roll. You lose, you get your ass chewed. That Yankee locker room right now is no fun to be in, right? Yeah. That Philly locker room is great. Politics is all echo chambers. Even when the polling's bad, there is a belief that, hey, we're on the right side of history. America will figure it out. We're going to support Joe. Sports doesn't have that. We've got salary caps, standings, a game the next night. You win, you lose. And so everybody knows the score. There's a lot of, in politics, even when you lose an election, it's rigged. How many people, political pundits, ever go on the air and say, yeah, wrong, whiffed completely? It's viewed as weakness. It's giving the other side a chance to be a vulture, circle and pounce. And so with Joe Biden, they should have been having very hard conversations 3 years ago. I mean, there was cognitive decline going into the election. I mean, I've talked to athletic directors who have great football coaches. They have a list in their desk of 4 possible coaches to hire if they go on a 3-game losing streak, right? In politics, it's this constant reassurance. We've got the right guy. We're on the right side of history. Don't trust the polling. And instead of just having really hard conversations about Joe Biden, and nobody should be president, in my opinion, in their 80s. It's such a taxing job. The argument I made, Obama went into the White House and was spry and young and bouncy. It came out with gray hair and fatigued and exhausted. Remember, he disappeared for about 6 weeks. Like, I'm going to go to a beach and hang out with my family. So this was obviously, there should have been really hard discussions, but people tend to go to their camps in politics. And one of the things I said that I love about sports is we don't do that. I mean, fans will call for their own coaches' heads. I mean, Ohio State loses at Eugene this year. There'll be people on the message board, Crazy Town, that are like, Ryan Day can't beat Harbaugh or the good teams. That's healthy. The debates, the introspection, the self-criticism, it's what makes sports great, not denying what you saw happen. And that's what I like about sports. I like sometimes it's harsh. It feels a bit mean-spirited. I think that's incredibly healthy.
I completely agree. Just wholeheartedly agree. And, you know, I'm in some of these weird circles because I'm in that Substack universe, and I will sometimes be at some sort of dinner and talk to somebody who writes politics, and they might have a very condescending attitude to this world that we're in and sports. They might even call it sports ball. And I get it. This is the toy department of human events, as Pat Riley has called it. I understand that. But I would argue that there is a validation to any serious pursuit of excellence. It's something that you can learn from. It's something that you can be inspired by. And while sports might not matter, there is just something to the human endeavor of taking it seriously and having those results, having that scoreboard. And yes, feelings can get hurt. It's sad to see Bill Belichick pretty much unceremoniously pushed out. Same with Pete Carroll with the Seahawks when they reach a certain age. But there's also a beauty in that this matters and we're taking it seriously. And it's ironic that where it should matter, where it is serious in politics, nope. It's what you're saying. It's a lot of echo chamber, a lot of cult of personality, a lot of people reassuring themselves of things that aren't so. But that's just the case for whatever reason. Sports, people are taking it seriously and trying to be the best. Politics, it just seems like something else is happening.
Yeah, sports is, it's politics. The difference is it's election day every day. There's a game. Every Sunday is election day. Somebody told me this years ago when I got into this business, Colin, you're in politics. They're just voting on you every single day. They're turning you on, they're turning you off. And in politics, maybe it's because, you get, every 4 years, you have the big election and you talk yourself in and out of things. But the Democrats are in the position they're in because they've run a very poor campaign. It's the same reason Hillary Clinton lost. She stopped campaigning and Trump was hyper aggressive. He was on TV every night calling radio shows. I've said I'm not a Trump fan. I worry about more immunity on the Supreme Court ruling. But it is easy to just roll your eyes and say, America just doesn't know what they're doing. But the Democrats are in this place because of the Democrats. Their messaging is poor, an unwillingness to have hard conversations about Joe Biden, and not like reaching out. You know, it's really interesting, and I tend to lean left more than right, but it's really interesting. When I can remember, I had a conservative dad, business guy, a local optometrist, loved Reagan, loved the way he tied his knots, the way he dressed, the way, you know, all that stuff. And it was back in those days, if you attacked the government or were outspoken, you were like a hippie, you were a rebel, you were trouble. And it's really interesting when people push back, conservatives and moderates push back on the vaccine and COVID. You know, the mostly left-leaning media was outraged that you would push back on the government. And I don't have a strong opinion on this, but it is fascinating that I'm old enough to remember when sort of the anti-government opinions were considered by conservatives to be terribly disruptive. And it's just the opposite now. That I may not have agreed with Aaron Rodgers' vaccine take, but there was a lot of experimenting going on. There was a lot of, I mean, how many times I've gotten an email to get a booster shot? Like, I got it once, I'm out. So I think it's healthy to ask tough questions, look in the mirror. I think it's really healthy to push back on government. And I think sometimes the left has gotten a tad comfortable with authority. And I just remember it was completely different 30 to 40 years ago, watching my dad, the conservative, you know, sort of rail or push back on people that were considered irresponsible and poking and prodding government officials in policy. It's just, you know, I'm not an expert on it, but it has flipped.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I'm fascinated by the results of elections. I often am surprised by them. I like knowing what people think because...
Oh, I love election night. It's the best night of TV every 4 years. The best.
Yeah, but other people, Colin, we're unusual in that. I think we're a little bit 30,000 feet, a little bit just, I think, you know, my life will be relatively fine, whatever happens. And I'm curious, a lot of people are living and dying with those results and they can't, I keep saying compartmentalize. I got to find a different word for it, but how else can you talk about it? They can't take their feelings out of it because this stuff does matter and just go, huh? I mean, I looked at 2022 where the Democrats did better in the midterms than I would have expected. And I went, well, that's interesting. I wonder why that is and where is it happening? And, you know, what messaging seemed to work right there. And I don't think that's how people usually go about these things. And it's part of what I call the PRification of everything, where it used to be people just gave their opinions and they didn't worry about who that opinion would help. But now we're all interconnected on social media. So Trump nearly gets assassinated, and just objectively, and you don't have to say that this means that he would make a good president, or you could have every negative opinion you had about him going into that. But that was a pretty impressive moment for him as a 78-year-old man to pop up with the, you know, with the fist up in the air. And people don't even want to give that away. People don't want to even give anything because there's this sense of, well, then I'm going to help his image and I will help him get elected. And it's this issue where people really in politics find it very hard to just make assessments of things in a way. Despite the tribalism of sports, we still have that, Colin. There's still a little bit of people being honest publicly because they know the games will be decided on the fields and on the courts.
Well, there's also a lot of money in social media through politics, much more than sports. So there are people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on these X accounts and these TikToks and these different platforms. So, you know, you've got some bad actors on both sides because that's you don't ever have to leave your apartment or your house. You can just sit there and brandish strong opinions and click-worthy images. I don't think that's the real money in sports. I think there's limitations, but I think in politics, it's so tribal, it's so loud. You know, years and years ago, I don't know, it was some critic was criticizing somebody, I don't know who it was, and they were taking a sportscaster or radio host to task for an opinion. And I just rolled my eyes. It's like 5 or 6. I think I just got to FS1, or maybe it was late at ESPN. And I'm like, have you guys ever listened to Mark Levin? Have you ever listened to some of the Glenn Beck stuff? And that's not a criticism of the artistry of radio. Those shows are, I mean, it is full-fledged hockey contact. It is crashing into the boards. It is strong, loud accusations. Sports stuff. When critics pick on sports guys for strong opinions, like we're not playing at the same speed of politics. The anger, the venom of politics is a 10. We're at a 3. And so I always sort of roll my eyes, even when people, they pick on debate shows and stuff. I think it just doesn't matter. It's just sports. I mean, we don't even matter as much as meteorologists who literally can, you could literally give the wrong advice and the wrong forecast and somebody gets caught in a flood or a tornado. So I think, when I look at sports opinion, this stuff's all fun to me. It's all, to me, I always think, keep it light, keep it fun, keep it moving, keep the pace up. There'll be a few turnovers. Don't lose any sleep. MJ even shot 50%. You're going to miss shots. The criticism for broadcasters say this or that. I always roll my eyes and think, go listen to radio and political radio every night or day and see the venom projected at public figures.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like what I would say when I was in locker rooms, David Lee would be furious at me because I'd say the Warriors should trade him. And I just said, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong tomorrow. You can prove me wrong tomorrow. You can prove me wrong over time. I'm not the one in control of your fate. You're in control of your fate. I don't think that really went over too well with him, but what are you going to do? Colin, this has been fantastic, man. You do not need me to promote what you're doing, but we always tell people in the outro to plug what they got going on. I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire. So what should we be checking out?
It's called The Volume. It's a company I formed about 4 years ago. Very proud of it. Draymond Green, Nightcap, Jason Timp, John Middlecoff, so many good people. Club 520. We're bringing back the favorites, Chad Millman, who I just love dearly. We've got all the. I know I'm forgetting people and just. Yeah. Please go if you can. If you have 3 minutes in a day, check us out. Feel very fortunate. It's such a great time right now. It is such. I look at it right now. People, and I think maybe men more than women, we tend to be a bit ritualistic. We're creatures of habit, and new stuff. We back up on new stuff. We get a Big Ten now. With the 4 most interesting, arguably, Pac-12 brands injected into the Big Ten. We are very close. We're getting a 12-team playoff in college football. The WNBA now, we have a Bird Magic rivalry that's fascinating. The baseball, the Phillies, the Dodgers, these are the Yankees, like stacked teams, especially the Phillies. I sometimes feel is the only great athlete I never saw play that I feel I missed was Sandy Koufax. The NBA is getting, it may not rate, but it's getting into, it's becoming incredibly global. Like Wemby could be the greatest prospect ever. I look at sports right now and I'm so effing lucky to be in it. I just feel like I hope I get another 10 years doing this. I am so lucky that the audience, at least some people come every day. I freaking love what I do. And I feel like the next 10 years, the globalization of this league is just sports I've never seen more great athletes and better, smarter coaching in my life.
I'd agree with that. And I channel that optimism, enthusiasm. I know I'm ending the podcast, but I will just I think Kenny Atkinson, now coach of the Cavs, would be okay with me relaying this conversation I had with him, but he's an assistant coach France, on Team France. And it might not be breaking news to be blown away by Wemby, but he is absolutely blown away by Wemby. And it's not just the physical gifts and the skills, it's the mentality that is unusual for a 7-footer, that there is just a hunger for greatness and also an intelligence that Atkinson was relaying. So don't be surprised. I know people are preparing for that guy to take over, but don't be surprised if it happens a little quicker than one might think, because it's not just the gifts. It's the full package out there in France. So, stay tuned for Wemby. It's funny. I told people to visit the Grand Canyon, and I got some shit for that because everybody knows, but hey, sometimes it's good to just emphasize an obvious take there, just like I would emphasize checking out all of Colin's content, because it is fantastic. Thanks so much, Colin.
Good seeing you, buddy.